All right. This is the first of what we hope to be many, many videos. We both have some experience with podcasting and video creation in the past. But this is a new venture for us, right? We're leading into the prestige. We don't have yet, I think, fully formed ideas around what the channel is going to represent, the YouTube channel. But we do know that we're going to be sharing stuff from our wheelhouse that will hopefully provide some value to well-seasoned coaches hitting some hot topics. Yeah, your first round, you came with 10 great options, and I said, I'm going to hijack this and start with one question only, which is, let's start. How do we start? The problem of starting. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know who can lead in here, but I think the reason that I wanted to do that was because I'm feeling it. And I think over the last 3 months, we've built a whole world with the prestige. And it's been a lot. And I think that we didn't have a lot of hesitation leading into that because we had conviction around it. But I think a lot of times when you launch a new business or a new anything, passion, hobby, craft, YouTube channel, there's always that fine line or that point where things go from hesitation to action. And for some people, that doesn't come, right? And then for us, I would say in this case, we're not quite, we don't have a fully fledged plan around this YouTube channel, but we have conviction around the value that we can provide, where we want to go with it. And so a couple days ago, we said, let's just start. Let's start with getting started. And yeah, I don't know if that sparks any thoughts for you, but I feel that it's important to take the leap like we are right now. And so
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has sparked some thoughts, the idea of starting fresh. I think there's something really endearing when you look back to starting fresh as like a baby, brand new anything. That feels a little bit different than starting fresh, decades into a career. And, I'll give us a little more credit than you did on starting this channel. We have put some significant conversations into what if we did something like this for at least a year, maybe longer, because we understand the value of creative and professional synergy. So when you have people that can riff off of ideas and share experiences and provide some context to this wild world called performance coaching, I think there's inherent value to listening to how people think and what they've experienced and how they're approaching challenges, whether in their own life or, with clients that we lead. And so we do have some intent around the value that we hope to provide, but I'm with you. I don't know exactly the shape it will take, the format. There's a lot of fluidity in starting, but you got to take those first swings sometimes, and then I think you'll find yourself.
Yeah. Well, how did it feel to you when I hijacked the first round here?
I like it. I like the topic mostly because I hate starting and I hate first episodes because you feel like you owe the audience some kind of explanation about here I am, here's what I'm doing, here's why we're starting this. And that's certainly true. I think you did a great job, but I'd rather actually just dive in. And so when you introduced the topic of starting, it felt appropriate. Might as well get it out of the way. It's like those first nerves of small talk or, anything that just, you got to get that warm up out of the way before you can really just sink in and enjoy what it is that you do.
Yeah. Well, and it's always that, paradox or tension between launching before you're ready. And if you don't launch, nothing will happen, obviously. But that hesitation comes with, I think, not wanting to put something out that isn't polished, right? And I don't think you get to the polished version of whatever you're trying to produce without taking the leap, learning on the fly, getting feedback. finding that groove first. And so that's a weird thing. Like and it doesn't go away ever. Like anytime that you start something, there's always going to be that dynamic, unless you're delusional and think that everything is just going to go your way um, all the time. Sometimes it will, maybe. Um, but yeah, with something like this, I mean, for me, I think this is a great paradigm for most creative ventures. I mean, where do you see people getting stuck? And you've coached a lot of people through that moment of transition where they don't get off the fence,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I've called it the 6 inch gap, and I don't know that 6 inches is a magical number, but it's the difference between being on the sidelines or actually in the arena, or you'll appreciate the martial arts metaphor, but being next to the mat, like adjacent to, and thinking about getting on the mat, and then actually stepping onto the mat. And now we begin. And that seems to be a really large gap for many people. And I would even say many confident people, many high level leaders. And because they certainly are great thinkers. And there's a fine line between being a great thinker and evaluating the whole premise of an idea that they have and the viability of it and the challenges and how they're going to work with that idea over the long haul, and overthinking. There's a very fine line between thinking and overthinking. And that's, I think, what I would consider the 6 inch gap. Like, you got to think enough to be smart about what you're doing, but then at some point you got to stop thinking and move.
Well, if you're not somebody with enough experience to fully filter or assess that, how do you know when you're in the
Maybe you just slate to not thinking as much, and then you learn by making errors. I don't know. How would you answer that? I mean, people stay in thinking mode forever.
We've talked about this before, but I think it's important if you're in that condition where you don't have enough experience or maybe knowledge to properly filter the difference between thinking and overthinking in this particular case. But I think it's really important that you have some semblance of like the real risks in front of you. I don't know how else you navigate that decision, right? So maybe you don't have a lot of experience, but if you can quantify how much is truly at stake, how many months you're going to commit to it, how many dollars are going to be thrown at it, what the true stop loss or cutoff is going to be for this venture. And a lot of people just don't do that step. Like they assume it's going to work, they put a lot of money into it, and the assumption is if it doesn't work in 6 months, well, I'll add more, right? I'll just keep adding more. And so while that's not terrible, I think a lot of things can be done that way. It's also how the graveyard of entrepreneurs gets filled up.
Yeah, fair. But you don't get to be a really savvy strategist without making a lot of bad moves, right?
True, but you can calculate real risk exposure. Like even somebody without experience has access to that. They may not want to, or you may not fully like appreciate that ability, but if you can at least do that, then like you put yourself in a category of like positive surprises versus if you don't do that basic I don't know, and maybe that just comes under people's P&L and they just it makes sense for a lot of people, but I see that mistake happen with first time entrepreneurs all the time, even people fresh out of business school that like they don't do that. I mean, they do it on paper, right? But it's not a real thing for them. Like they don't really think they can lose anything, or I don't know. Do you see anything like that?
Yeah, and I mean, there's something around blind delusion, not illusion, blind delusion that can kind of work in people's favor. Like things shouldn't work, but they totally do. So I kind of want to set that aside. As
1 out of 1,000 manifestors.
Sure, right? However, to your point, I think something that we've always jived around is being functional pessimists, which surprises people. Where by the time we're a yes to something, we've already evaluated some of the worst case scenarios and decided, can we survive that or not? And I think that that's in a world of like positivity and always thinking about the best case scenario. I think there's a place for pessimism and maybe I would say realism that is the counterweight to it. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one to maybe abstract into a point of policy. I think people just kind of have their predisposition for pessimism, optimism, cynicism. That's probably not going to change without radically different life circumstances, I would imagine. But
I don't believe you. I would disagree with you on that.
you don't think it's a predisposition?
I think it can be. I think it's a learned predisposition. But actually, where I started, I would say I was a blind optimist, turned pessimist by conditioning, and then had to relearn optimism, and then probably now hug both. So a really good, I mean, this is the whole movement around positive psychology from Martin Seligman, how people learn cynicism, and he calls it learned helplessness, and then how they can condition themselves back into a more realistic, chosen optimism where they're informed and participating in reality versus turning a blind eye to it or judging it ahead of time. It's a really healthy psychology. And so I hold the line that everybody can change a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, to your point, though, you need evidence to the contrary, which is hard to get without that success. And if you're leading with a certain predisposition. Yeah, anyway, I get you. That all makes sense.
I mean, are you going to be how would you title yourself? Are you a cynic?
Yeah, sometimes. Probably. But I'm also a very optimistic and hopeful person. I don't think that comes across to a lot of people, but I think I oscillate back and forth between the two. And I think sometimes people only see the cynicism, but for me to first take action, like when we voted on the Prestige, like that had zero cynicism in it. But along the way, you have to be careful, right? There's a lot of stuff that can derail great plans and high hopes. And so I think that what may strike other people as pessimism or cynicism is, for me, just trying to remain vigilant around landmines. I don't know, and maybe inside I'm not always, finding that balance, because if you're only looking at those landmines, sometimes you're going to drift towards cynicism more so than optimism. It's a tough balance to find.
Yeah, I think so too. For what it's worth, I haven't ever experienced you as like a real diehard cynic. You seem to hug that balance pretty well in evaluation.
Yeah. And I don't know what that is, because a lot of people would say that I come across as a skeptic. But I think that's
maybe because you ask the tough questions, right? Like,
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but I think that one thing that is interesting around this dynamic is that a couple of things materialize. Like I can think of people that are serial starters. Like they too readily dive in and they rarely finish or rarely push things to a point of like genuine breakthrough, because you're going to hit walls. Like that's always going to happen along the way. And so like an example might be when I was in college, I had this sensation at one point that I was never, like there was a problem. Like I wasn't a great reader in high school. Like I don't feel like I had great comprehension. I didn't push myself to do it. In college, I did a lot to try to improve and reverse that. But at one point I realized, like, if I don't make a commitment to finishing every book that I start, like, what is that going to say about my approach to everything? And so it just became a commitment. Like, if I opened a book, I felt a responsibility to read it to its last words. Like, I didn't read it to the second to last chapter or close it halfway through, even if the book sucked. And I would just push myself through it. And it's like, I owe it to the author. I owe it to the version of myself that starts things, that I'm going to be a finisher. And it was just a conscious decision at one point, because I was like, oh, who are you if you don't do that? And I don't know. I don't know if there's an answer. And I think there are times where you assess and you need to call it quits and bail. There are times like that. But on the one hand, it's a tough thing to cultivate if you don't, on the one hand, start enough things to feel what it's like to not finish. And then on the other hand, if you don't acquire the filters that, like, if you're okay in that gray zone, you don't really get good at anything. You constantly start, and this falls into the jack of all trades category versus a true craftsman in any one category. But there's that stick-to-itiveness that really makes somebody exceptional at anything. And you don't get that if you just start a bunch of shit. But also, like, how do you acquire the filters that when you start the next thing, it's going to be worth it? Because how many things, like, I'm in my mid 40s now, how many things do I want to be starting over the next 5 years that I either A, don't finish, or B, don't see some kind of payoff or upside to? So I'm ruthless in saying no to things. I say no to almost everything. So would I want to start 5 things like the Prestige and have all 5 of them fail? Or find the one thing like that and say, I'm going to go all in. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not going to be a halfway thing, and fate will determine how far this thing goes and flourishes and succeeds, but I'm not going to be the stuck point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Do you still operate from that heuristic? Like, you have to finish every book you pick up, and then by proxy, or also like finish everything that you begin?
Not as much. Like, if I try to, and I think over recent years I spend more time writing than reading, and so that's shifted my perspective a little bit. So if I open a book and I'm not gripped within the first chapter in a way, it doesn't mean I'm out forever, but I may put it down for a while and see if something else is more gripping. But the other one that I would do is paintings, and I would progressively work on larger paintings, and sometimes they would take months, and that would be the type of thing where you'll have many, many days where you're just like, I'm ready to just take it out to the dumpster. Like, I just don't want to work on it. I don't want to finish it. And there were, those moments where you reapproach it and you try to start fresh and clear yourself and just say, okay, like, there's more detail yet. Where there's like an impulse to call it finished early because you're like, oh, it looks pretty good. But in your mind when you started it that it was more filled out, you had more planned for it. And most people would appreciate it at the level that you feel that resistance and you could just walk away. But you'll know you didn't do it. And so, I don't know. It's almost a point of insanity to have that kind of conviction. Like, when you're the one you're probably the only one that's going to feel it. But you feel like it's more meaningful than just that thing, right? It's bigger than just this decision.
Yeah, I think you tied it to, like, what does it say about you? Like, what kind of person? And I do think there's a level of knowing yourself. I mean, there's certainly a counter argument when somebody holds themselves ruthlessly to finishing everything at that craftsman standard, even when it's not working, that bogs people down. I think that's rarer these days than it used to be. But I think there can be an over attachment that I said I was going to do it. I'm going to do it all the way through. I'm never going to deviate, even when they're clearly just bashing themselves up against a metaphorical brick wall on it. And so I do think there's a level of knowing yourself that if you were, a person who could start easily and then not finish, then perhaps what could be experienced by offering yourself the opposite tendency as a hard and fast rule. I was going to go somewhere else. It's gone now. Yeah, but I think the other thing in what you said that struck me was the ability to assess not just the activity itself, but the pattern that it's enforcing or reinforcing within you. And so what is missed sometimes by stopping mid-painting. Like, what would you experience on the other side of even all the way follow through on a crappy idea? Like, seeing it all the way through, maybe the idea itself wasn't actually the thing that was the most valuable nugget. Maybe it
Yeah,
was something that you picked up along the way that's going to seed the next idea. But
100%.
but people
Yeah,
won't, people won't ever know that if it's, they stop early, mid-process.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. But man, it's really easy to evaluate mid-process. And
Well, and it's hard to know where that line is. It's hard to know if it's the doing of the thing that is going to be the value for you, or if it's the thing itself. Like, is it just having the painting that you intended to paint, or the book you intended to write, or finishing a project that is itself meaningful, or is it the practiced act of following through that pays dividends? And I don't think we ever know that. And so the only, you know, it's more of a conviction or a commitment to an ethos than it is to knowing anything like that. It's just, well, we don't know what that will do. We don't know what the commitment will do, but we know what the opposite of that commitment will do, right? If we take it in its negative form, which is never finishing, right? When we take these to absolutes, we know where one of them goes absolutely. The other one, we don't know, but maybe some of the time, right?
yeah, so I think what's interesting though, what strikes me is this actually has to do with what I think a lot of people struggle with, which is a level of self-trust and then trusting extension to others. But if you're always picking something up and then you typically wobble in between and then may or may not finish, I think it does establish a level of a self-relationship where I don't think you really take yourself at your own word, where you'll say something and you'll be like, yeah,
That's a
well,
good point.
we'll see. But that also extends then into how people experience you as an individual or a leader. And that is, I think, a deeper decision around who somebody wants to be. But it just struck me. I'm like, man, I would not be creating the prestige with you if you weren't a person that I could count on your yes. Like, I'm in.
Yeah, I
That
appreciate that.
is deeply
Likewise.
unsettling when somebody is a yes today and then they're a maybe tomorrow and then they're evaluating constantly whether they're doing this or not. You can't
Yeah.
be in partnership with people like that. But I think people on an individual level are also living with that kind of instability.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an integrity breach, right? Whether or not it's felt, there's something just very elegant and beautiful around doing the things that you say you're going to do. And it's so much harder than it sounds. And it's really important that you don't overcommit to things. And that's a point of growth that you have to say, okay, I didn't complete this many things and that doesn't look great and feel great. And so I'm going to say yes to less, but the things that I say yes to, I need true follow through with. And I mean, I think that YouTube for us is an example of that type of a conviction. Like, I don't think it makes sense to go into this direction without a sense that we're working on a bigger storyline. But we did go into Instagram without a clear conviction, and it was kind of like, well, it's the lesser of evils, and it's relatively easy access, and we know we need touch points, right? We had a series of filters. And we're like, well, we know we can do it, but we don't really know. We didn't go in with that conviction that we're going to crush Instagram, and I don't think we have the experience or knowledge to do it, right? And so I think there is space for like lateral exploration. Not everything needs to be like a vertical, like putting your flag in the ground, like this is going to be where I take a stand. Because a lot of times we don't know. And so I think that's perfectly fine too, to enter things with a like an energy of exploration and curiosity and testing the waters until you have more conviction too. Because some people just don't, right?
But I think there's a level of quality that people can bring even when they're open hand exploring. Like I wouldn't I wouldn't expect people to bring like a perfectionistic quality or like their highest level of work. We certainly have had our fair share of just weird stuff as we're figuring out Instagram, and I'm sure also YouTube. But there's a qualitative aspect of bringing your full self to that moment where it may not be the best ever in your career, but you're bringing your full consciousness to it. We might say like you're actually trying versus, yeah, I'm experimenting. We'll see. I don't know. I don't care. There's still a level of centeredness that I see people bring or leaders bring when they're exploring laterally that I find really inspiring. Where they're honest, they're humble, that they're trying something new, and yet they're bringing their intelligence and presence to that thing.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I'm not sure if it struck you as you were talking, but those two, we have two events that actually mirror those two different approaches, right? Dice Club is more of that lateral exploration, where one of the original premises, like way back in the day, of that was that we don't know what's really good for us. Another way to put that is that we may not be able to fully identify the best courses of action for ourselves all the time, right? But there's also a lot of upside in untested avenues. And so sometimes you just need a call to action around things that you might not be doing otherwise, because a lot of positive things can happen, and that can generate, I mean, you still have to enter them with commitment and focus, but it's maybe 1 week of commitment versus 1 year of commitment or something like that. And then you test and see. But then we have Incendium, right? And the premise of that is really like massive commitment and like an acceleration of your focus all in, I think.
Yeah, I mean, those are good parallels. I was thinking you were going to talk about the power event, which is how we resource from within and then extend without to influence and leadership of others. But
Well, say
yeah,
more, say more about that then, because I didn't connect it.
oh, yeah, like the level, like who's the self that you're bringing to this moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like where are you resourcing your agency, your power from, which builds that level of, I think, self integrity and trust that in this moment, I trust me. But then also, we don't live in insular bubbles, right? So I think the cool thing in the power event is the exploration of what happens when you extend that self power or empowerment, which is very popular these days, trending. But is it really power if you can't hold that or interact with others in meaningful ways? Right. So I think that's the interesting piece around self trust, but also being in integrity with how you interact with others and your extension of this is what I think, this is what I'm a commitment to, here's how I play. And to be able to do that in a variety of different styles, whether you're, you know, just dominating somebody in like bro leadership or you know other strategy. I think that's what excites me about the power event. I thought that's where you were going to go, so you surprised me with
Mm.
Dice Club, which is almost the opposite premise of know thyself, right? Where it's like maybe you don't
The
know
opposite,
yourself.
the opposite premise of know yourself. Yeah, it's the opposite. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe you don't
the
know.
assumption is that you don't know yourself truly. Yeah,
Mm.
I mean,
I
and
just think it's
we all do
cool.
to an extent.
I mean, I think it's cool to have. I mean, I'm biased. I love the prestige, and I think it's cool to have this arena for people to experience themselves and like play with these themes in ways that they're a bit padded from the consequence of playing with those themes in their regular life.
Oh, that's a good observation. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Interestingly, when you put it like that, there are reservations. Like there's a heaviness to these themes that if you deal with them in if you deal with them in the sense that there is a personal consequence, I think they become very heavy. I mean, that's every event is essentially a philosophy course with its own direction, its own, in some cases, its own metaphysics, but its own ethics and its own like its own rules and things like this. But if you deal with a notion like power and take that truly to heart, like what does it mean in my world? Some people feel like, that power is the opposite of humility. Some people feel humility is empowering. Some people feel like, there's a million different versions of this, or that physical aggression is absolutely a wrong, right? And it's like, well, what if your family's at risk? What if we could easily think of a million scenarios, right? And one of the things, I mean, the one of the premises of power that I love is that we have evolving ethical conflicts. And so, I remember back when I was in college that there was that, it was a philosophy course, but there was one of the questions on the ethics of lying. Is lying ever okay? And, I mean, it's a very kind of entry level exploration for most people, but and everybody's like, well, I think lying is okay. Lying is not okay. It depends on the lie. White lies are okay. Big lies are not okay. It depends. Does it hurt anybody? Does it not hurt anybody? Right? So everybody's just speculating. And then the prof says, well, what if somebody, comes to your door, and is, looking for, what if it's a Nazi at your door and you're, protecting a family of Jewish people in the basement? And is it okay to lie to save their lives? And everybody's like, oh, yeah, I guess we'll probably, right? And so and then you add to it. And what about with this? And then what about with that? And so there's like an evolving complexity to these circumstances. You realize that most of them are circumstantial. Like our values and our ethics are very circumstantial. And that's fascinating. But it says a lot more about us than it does about those things. Like, we don't know. Yeah, it depends. And we always have partial insight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I would think this in that situation. I would think that in that situation. But the manner in which I do it is identical. It's a lie. It's wrong there. It's okay there. Okay, well, it says a lot more about me than about lying, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. But yeah, but to explore like that sense of power under real ethical dilemmas for yourself, like, am I giving up my power when I ignore somebody or when I answer them in such and such a way? This could have a wide range of complexities. Am I, enacting my power by quickly responding? Am I enacting my power by, being radically honest and sincere? Is me being sincere even true? Like, or is it just a conviction? Like, how do I define I mean, all these things could get unraveled and gain in complexity as we go. And it's like, well, that is not fun to explore for yourself in real life. I mean, we should do it when we can, but there's consequence to it. And sometimes it's easier to have an ice cream and watch a good Netflix special. And that's how it is. But if you can show up to an event where you can play with these tensions, really kind of take a position, own it, feel the conflict and struggle from other people, and then we progress and move on. And it's a new thing. It's like you get exposure to 5 years of ethical dilemmas and you have conviction around it, but there's no personal consequence unless you want to take it home. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of those things where it's something about it sticks with you,
Yeah, I think so.
And you can't shake it. You felt something different, and it gives you maybe new understanding, but also new range. I think what's funny, I don't know if you put two together on this, but in college, I studied psychology and you studied philosophy, which is a really interesting intersection around the prestige itself, because essentially you think of philosophers like these dusty theoretical conversations, but because you work with the body and you're a person of action, these are not dusty conversations. It's actually not theory at all. It's actual application. And similarly for me with psychology, how people think, why they do what they do, how they move, like how they self-motivate, what makes them tick endlessly fascinates me. And so in a way, this is also inviting people into a self-experiment, or like a social experiment too. so they can experience a whole different side that they really maybe just won't do in their personal life because of the fallout, because of the consequence, because of drama. And to your point, you don't want to deal with that stuff always.
Yeah. 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 I think a safe space to truly walk in different shoes is a very special thing.
Mm-hmm.
To feel what that's like is not easy without a lot of commitment in general, right? Like to do it with authenticity. But if you can create the right structures and framework to be able to explore that like this, you get to be many different versions of yourself. That's the other weird thing is I think a lot of people have the assumption that they're one entity, they're one identity person. I'm not really a fan of that perspective. Maybe you as a psychology master can weigh in on
I
that.
dropped the
But
psychology master a long time ago. But yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think people are one fixed identity. If they choose to create themselves as that, then that's their choice. I don't know that it occurs to people that they can just create themselves to be different. And not in imaginary mindset, like they actually have to show up and behave differently.
mm-hmm.
But I think it's a really sincere inquiry for people. Can I really change?
Mm-hmm.
Can people around me really change? Not just at the level of control and behavior, but even fundamentally in identity, how they self-experience, and then what that version of them is able to do in their
Mm.
life.
Yeah.
I think I heard it said once there's a 6-word prison sentence. That's just the way I am.
Right.
One of the topics I think that might be helpful if we can hit the question: what do people do, like, if they're trying to evaluate an idea? They have an idea of something they might want to try or do or expand into. Just hypothetically, when you have a fresh idea, what do you take yourself through to really sense, feel, think, assess whether you're a yes to it and it's worth testing and doing?
That's a really open question. And I think it depends a lot on, it depends a lot on the subject matter. Depends on how much of me it requires, like how much of a commitment. Is it a 1 day thing or is it a 2 year thing, right? I mean, that would matter quite a lot. With something like the Prestige, it was, I think, passion directed, meaning that there were a lot of things that for me fell into place. One, the passion, the curiosity, the intrigue, the limitless element to it. I could see the potential for uh, a phenomenal challenge for us, a great business, an incredible product, but also one that isn't static, right? Like even in the creation of it so far, it's constantly evolving, and every time that we're working on a new event, there's an evolution in that way, right? So for me, it offers a lot of things that internally make me thrive. So that was conceptually an easy yes, even though we probably still took a couple of weeks to say, okay, let's actually take this fully on. But if I don't have that level of conviction, this really aligns with those two categories I mentioned before around Incendium or Dice Club. I will try to generate options that are low risk, that I can set in play without a lot of effort or money or risk, that could potentially expand upside. And so
Yeah.
a lot of it depends on how much I like it or care about it or want to do it. And if I just think it's good for me, I'll explore laterally. How many options can I set at play as quickly as possible?
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
yeah, what about you?
Yeah, probably similarly. I think I'm thinking like what I do, and then also this question comes up quite a bit when clients work with me, because it's like, hey, I have this idea. I don't know if it's viable. what do you think about it? And what they're asking is not actually what I think, it's help me decide my yes or no. And so I'm thinking about for myself with the prestige and other ideas over the years, it's not so different. I think it's a bit of a union between logic and intuition, where I think I first evaluate probably similarly, like what is exactly specifically the commitment to this idea. You know, like you said, whether it's a day, whether it's there's travel involved, whether it's actually a long game commitment, like can I devote myself to this for 5 years, for 10 years more? Those are really different feels. And so when the idea hits, I think being as specific as possible on what exactly might this require of me is helpful, even though there will be a lot of question marks in that. I don't know on this, I don't know on this, but at least getting clear on specificity that we would know.
Yeah.
I think I also evaluate on the logic side that worst case scenario, you know, the acronym FUBAR. So it's like, if it all goes to hell in a handbasket, what's the potential like fallout or risk for that? Am I okay with that on one hand, but also what are ways that I could maybe mitigate that or avoid it altogether? And then what's the best case scenario? What's the potential upside? And does that excite me? Like, is there enough like juice here that if it did work, I would really, really love that, such that I'm balancing out that like risk and reward balance, which is all made up, but we can actually sense it inside. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. But I think to your point on the other side, the intuitive side, has a lot to do with desire. How much do I want it? And it's interesting when there's conviction and desire and it sounds fun and there's a passion to it. There's almost a recklessness to an artist that said, this is art worth doing, even if it fails, which I think is a really powerful position that you can't fake. Like you can't actually try to generate that if it's not there.
Well,
But when it is there, it sometimes overrides some of those risk evaluations where you're like, yeah, this is a risky place, or this might present a challenge, but you're like, I'm still gonna do it. And then to bring your full self to that thing. So I do think there's a really interesting synergy between the necessary like logical assessment and then also the wilder, passionate artist that I don't know. For me, I honor both. So.
well, you said that your clients are often looking for validation of their ideas, not really asking for your opinion. How do you, I mean, what's your process in coaching somebody through that around starting a new venture?
Yeah, I think similarly, I want them to get the whole idea out of them, as messy as that is. Generally, even when they say, well, it just struck me. For my people, it didn't just strike them. Like it's been percolating. They've been maybe operating from okay, like what I have is okay, but they've been thinking about other ideas. They've been like considering it for a while by the time that they're bringing it up. And so, like, I don't know, there's something like, let's dump out all the puzzle pieces on the table, right? Like, let's see everything that you possibly be playing with here. And then to take a look at like, what is the appeal to this thing versus what you have going on right now? Why would you want something like that? And for me, I think there's a place for really strategic process that we can go through, but also sometimes just ask the obvious questions. Why do you want this? What does this give you that what you have going on doesn't? Is there an underexpressed part of you that this would allow you to explore?
Well, I know you've also told some people that they absolutely should not do it. And so what are the
That
filters
sounds
in
like
those
something
cases?
I would maybe say time to time.
Yeah. So what happens there?
Give me an example. Remind me of my own stories.
Uh, yeah. Wasn't there that goofy mountaineering pedophile character?
Oh, yeah. Yes. So I would say maybe a level of self-delusion, right? Where you have never demonstrated skill in that particular arena. You're going to be in charge of other people's safety. You are unwilling to train to develop that skill. And you want to hug a premium position in the market where you're claiming to be an expert in a thing that you're not in any way. That's just straight up delusion. So yeah, you absolutely should not do that thing. And if you do that thing, do not tell anybody that we had a conversation about it. Leave my name out of it, because I'm saying absolutely do not do that thing. So I think those are obvious examples, right? Like just like straight up lying, and being an unsafe person. But I think there's also a nuance to, sometimes we get stuck in the means to an end. I think of the story with, I'm going to write a book. Help me write a book. Right. And it's like, why do you want to write a book? What's your book about? I don't know. Have you ever wanted to write a book? No, I don't want to write one now. Then why are you writing a book? Because the market says that you should write a book to be an expert in your thing so that I can build my business.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say that that's always the wrong call, but it's like, that's kind of like the worst reason to write a book, right? Like, I have nothing to say. I don't want to write a book. I'm just going to write it as a means to an end to get business. It's going to be a crappy book. And it's not to say we couldn't excavate. Maybe there's more deeper, like maybe there is like a hidden narrative that they secretly want to. Like, I certainly, I think you think I'm a more of a hard ass than I am sometimes. I'll explore with people. But sometimes it's like, yeah, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you ever just straight up told a client you should absolutely not do that?
I mean, I don't really coach around the same parameters that you do and have. I tend to focus more on the hardware, right? And so a lot of the other stuff will sort itself out. I mean, there have been plenty of times where people have had, like, part of the waitlist process is that people do their journey worksheets at the beginning, right? Where we'll assess kind of the next 3 months, things that need to be unburdened, things that need to be achieved, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes the things that they like, the things that fall into their top three um, focal points or things that they would like to accomplish, I would put in the camp of delusion. But I don't really have to coach them around those things. So I have an
Yeah,
out.
one of the evaluative points is there's a difference between evaluating an idea and then, for me, evaluating an idea that I will professionally also help you create.
Mm-hmm.
I want
Right.
to also then have a conversation with them around, if if you are going to fail at this, what will be your unique way of failing? So that we can like properly have a conversation. This is before there may be even ever a client, where I can really just have a feel like, is this a partnership that I feel good about taking on? Meaning, like, we can have conversations about when it gets hard, because there's going to always be that inevitable dip. And there's in that, the psych model, the emotional cycle of change. Like, we always have that evaluative point where we're looking at a crow's eye from like where we are to what we want next or what we want to create. And we make incorrect conclusions at that point. We go, oh, it's easy. It won't take that long. Oh, no big deal. And that's fine. We're probably almost always going to do that. But really, really conscientious or conscious humans also take into account there's going to be a dip. So you're going to start to get into any project, and it's going to you have a moment or moments where you're like, wow, this is a lot more than I initially thought,
Yeah.
or whew, this is a bigger commitment, or wow, life is now starting to happen, and I don't know if I can maintain a commitment to both. And who people are in that dip, like I really like to have conversations up front about like, who are you going to be when that happens? Do you start looking for like the next shiny? Do you
Do you
quiet
really,
quit?
do you really, do you really trust them to self-assess?
I think it's a great conversation. I think they can self-assess. I like to believe my people are really intelligent, Tom, and I know they're
That's
going to
fair.
be listening to this, so I want them to know that I think that they're intelligent.
That's fair.
But I also, but I can also pick up and observe from my perspective, right? Like you didn't seem like you really believed yourself when you said that, or you looked
Yeah.
away,
Yeah.
or tell me a story when like something similar, you approach something similar, what happened? Are you willing to make different choices? Like, are you, and I think we can have really great, solid conversations at that level about it.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel mixed about that. And it's not, and says nothing about the intelligence of your or anybody's clients, but I just find that we're operating from very different state in those moments than who we are on day one, self-assessing how we might respond to like a level of pushback or failure or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. And that alone is probably the biggest issue and challenge I have as a coach, at least in the past, is getting people through that window, because they'll tell people it's coming, they'll kind of know that it's coming, and without fail, everybody succumbs to it.
Yeah, you've broken a lot of people over the years.
Indeed. I mean, but some people do get, they get the process down, and it's a universal process, and some people do have the skills to navigate it with, I think, proficiency, but it's not most people. And I just don't think that in those moments, it's not intellect isn't the issue. Like, they're all smart people, right? And the problem is that insecurity and fear and doubt, they do things to you that the intelligence then is aligned in a different direction. It starts it begins to justify and seek avenues for outlets and creates excuses, and still intelligence applied, but it's not applied in the way that they would have assumed in the beginning. They would have assumed it
Yeah.
would have been there to help them navigate toward a positive outcome, and it's
Well, I
just
think
not.
the intelligence at first is applied towards like how I can succeed. And then it starts to devolve, and the intelligence is redirected to self protect.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I can see that.
For sure. Protect the ego at all costs.
But I mean, I've had the privilege of going through your process. And I do feel like you have those kinds of conversations or like prep people ahead of time that like, this is the part where people quit. I mean, it's usually always about 50% the way through any process. I would want to fact check myself on that, but I feel like I've actually read that somewhere where it doesn't matter how long a container, transformational container is, the dip is almost always between that 40% and 60% through,
Well,
period.
I'd be really curious on that data. They may not be testing people beyond a long enough window. I don't. If it was 6 months, I don't believe that stat. But I think if it's between 6 and 12 weeks, yeah, I believe that stat. But from my experience, it's not. It doesn't really matter the time horizon necessarily. It tends to be in weeks 5 to 7 where I see the biggest fallout. And I think that would be regardless if it was a 100-day process or a 200-day process. I think that window still occurs in weeks 5 to 7.
Okay, so here's what's really interesting. We did a joint webinar not too long ago called The Art of Dangerous, like how people fail or quit in predictable patterns. And you just alluded to this, like week 5 or 6 or whatever. There's certain phrases that we, and I'm just going to say we because we can all subscribe to this from time to time. Like we will say particular phrases. And I think what helped me and continues to help is when I understand that those are patterns, they're not personal to me, then I get to have a choice point whether I am going to be that person and play to the pattern or choose differently. Things like, I'll give an example, like, well, it just doesn't feel aligned anymore. So I was committed, but now it just doesn't feel aligned when I sense in, and I really want to honor my intuition.
Yeah.
Right. And like, that's fine. That might be true. Right. But
The
like,
universe,
there's
the
these,
universe is telling me to bail on my commitments.
right. And so then it's like, when you have shared that before, I've heard that other places, there's just these moments where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to be that person. Like, I will not be the person that stops week 5 and excuses that quit.
Yeah, and that makes you a rare exception because it's a tendency and a pattern that even highly intelligent, trained professionals still succumb to. Like you can tell them that all day long, and I do. I tell everybody at the beginning that there is a risk window between weeks 5 and 7, and I do that not to like plant seeds or design that outcome. It's just that the outcome is so consistently predictable that if we at least breach that conversational barrier on day 1, it's not coming out of the blue and people don't feel judged at week 6.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm like, you're showing signs that you're in the shitter, you know, like where are you at? And then because without fail, smart people are going to get defensive too because they're like, oh no, it's just been a busy week, or like any number of things will come up and you're like, okay, well, did you execute those things? Because this will steamroll. And getting back to the painting and finishing of books propaganda from earlier, people are delusional around why they quit. It'll always make sense to stop. It is always going to feel better to quit something than to push through a barrier, always.
Yeah,
But
there's
if you push
always an
through,
immediate
it feels better on
relief.
the other side.
Yeah, there's
You just
always an
don't know that.
immediate relief. Like, oh, thank God, I
Always.
made the right decision.
Always. Just take the pressure off. It'll feel better. It's always going to be the best option immediately, just not for long-term payoff. And so we're not capable of assessing that, right? Like, yeah, I was trying to think of, I can't remember where it was exactly, but one of the challenges with fitness and with dieting and with a physical anything is that a lot of times the consequences, like you eat sugar and you're immediately rewarded, right?
Chemically, like yeah.
You're immediately rewarded, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
chemically. And the challenge is that the consequences, the true consequences, don't show up for many days. And so when you wind up with this much of a disconnect between stimulus and either positive outcome or negative outcome, you don't have an opportunity for operant conditioning in a way that is like aligned with your intuition. Like you need to your intuition is going to tell you this is good, right? That's why we fucking eat sugar all the time. It feels great, right? It's not your intuition. It's like if people that talk about intuitive eating, I finally there are people starting to come out that are dietitians and nutritionists that talk about, no, you should not be intuitive eating. Of course not. Like it's so obvious, but unless you are a highly, highly skilled and trained dietitian who has taken the time to filter that information in their bodies over time and study correlations, which is what every bodybuilder does when they look at calories in and calories out. They're studying the correlation of inputs to outputs. Yeah, then you can start to have an intuition. You start to feel those correlations after many years. If you don't do that, what you're feeling is a sugar rush. What you're feeling is maybe an overwhelm of vitamins and minerals from a good healthy meal from time to time, but our body fluctuates so much, our mind fluctuates so much. What's the value of intuition in these cases? You don't know. I mean, you need
Yeah.
to override it, I think.
Well, it's in the body arts, which I know is your specialty. It's in it's not it's also in business, honestly, where the choices of today may not show the outcomes for, like, they have to compound in
Mm,
order to show meaningful
yeah,
progress. And
yeah.
so there's a heuristic that I really love. It's like, first choice good, second choice bad, or first choice bad, second choice good. And it's really simple. It'll break down at some point. Every framework does, but it's this evaluation that, like, each choice really does matter. And I don't think that this means we need to be paranoid about every single freaking choice. But where we've determined we want to grow, those choices that build or detract from that growth matter on a larger scale than like one moment. But one phrase that you'll hear is, well, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. But like, this sugar doesn't really matter. Taking the day off doesn't really matter. Doing this tomorrow doesn't really matter. And there is a truth to that ish, but not really, because the compounding of that pattern means that you're taking a decay track over
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Versus, what if you apply instead to say it does matter? This choice does matter. It's contributing to growth, or it's contributing to decay in this area. And that's what I mean by good choice, or first choice good, second choice bad, is usually there's an immediate, like, ugh, this is a disciplined choice to tell myself no, or to hold to what I said, or to say no to sugar.
Right.
But the second gate of that, the second experience is good. So, yeah.
Yeah. No,
The
I
other sign
mean,
when people are in that dip, and like how we quit and then also feel really good about ourselves because we did, they go quiet. That's
oh
one
yeah.
almost universal indicator that I've seen, is they start maybe coming late to things. They start having schedule conflicts and need to reschedule, can't make things.
Well, there's a term for that now, quiet quitting.
Yeah, like, they won't actually, like, even lean in to a resource like a coach or a community, that will give them support. Not talk them into things or give pressure, but like give support. There tends to be, like, they just sort of backtrack and they go quiet. And I've just noticed, I'm like, it's only a matter of time if they don't self-correct at that point and say, okay, I've disappeared, I'm here, here's where I've been, can you help me with this? It will just be a matter of time before there's something around, now that I've really evaluated within, I think I'm like pausing or whatever it is. And it's almost universal. I don't know that I've seen an exception. How about you?
No, I mean that's how it. Well, yeah, I've seen different responses. Some of the I've dealt with plenty of reactive
Hmm. Okay, fair.
and aggressive people, but I also push. I also don't play nice at those transitions. I know what happens if people don't course correct quickly, and so I'll push them to make a decision, right? And often they're not ready to, because the tendency is to drift toward quiet quitting, and if they don't have that as an option, they'll get reactive.
Yeah, you're
But
pretty
that's
good at
also
pushing
that's
people's
also a
edges.
foundation for a conversation.
What's that?
Good. It's also the foundation for a conversation. It's like, good. I'm glad you feel something. I'm only pointing out that you aren't doing the things that are required, but also the things that you've committed to do for your own sake. And if that upsets you, let's have it out. It's not me. I don't care. But you won't be here in 2 weeks. Like that's how this story goes. So if you don't course correct, this is over. And unfortunately, I'd say the majority of people fall into that category. 2 to 3 weeks later, they properly are out. But there are maybe 30 to 40% who completely course correct, and they finish in a way that you could not have predicted. And that's worth it. That's worth putting the edge on and not letting people be tourists in an experience or in their own process, because some of them will take it on and become the heroes of their own story. And if you don't do it, then all of them would quit. Only they think that they're going to make it to the end. And some people will even do that. Oh, I made it to the end and I'm proud of that. Well, congratulations. You fucked off for the last 5 weeks and you drug yourself over, dragged yourself over the finish line. But you didn't grow, you didn't learn anything. You don't have any skills to carry forward, and you're not going to do them tomorrow. Like, and the whole point of any of these things, like the most valuable thing you can do is take away the principles and the tools so that tomorrow or the day after or the month later or 2 years later, you don't need a coach again. Mm-hmm. Like the best thing that we can do is work ourselves out of a job. I've always felt that way. But some people just like feel like they've done the thing by having the experience. And it's like, that's not the point. I mean, go get your ice cream and, movie time if you want an experience. It'll be more fun. You won't have to work as hard. But if you want something out of this, it'll make everything else easier down the road. The whole point is to take away what you can, right? And if you start at this level, can you leave with this much skill, a little bit more skill, a little bit more knowledge? But the point isn't to like stay here and drag yourself through it and say, hey, I finished. Okay. And then what? You're going to start here and you're going to start exactly here next time. And it's going to be more painful because you will remember the process and journey. Mm-hmm. I've never had anybody, and I've had several people that have, it's not a common thing, but I've had several people that have not done well in the weightlessness process once, and they've tried to give it a second go because they told themselves it was through external circumstances that they couldn't do it well the first time. But they weren't open to coaching. They didn't follow through on their commitments. They kind of just quit and bailed out in certain ways and showed up halfway. And it's like, no, this isn't an external thing. Like there are people that are working 16-hour days that are still showing up to this, and they don't have the same excuses. Now that's infrequent, but it can be done, right? And then the next time is worse. If the first time they quit at week 4, the next time they quit at week 3.
Well,
out of 12.
You hit on something too, that like external circumstances tend to either validate somebody's internal commitment or like give the out. And it's interesting to me that it's the very same things. Like I remember this this contrast, and it was so cool. It was a number of years ago, and I had like almost identical conversations with 2 different people. They were both going through a lot of life shit and yet had business goals. And the first person that I talked to, they were like, I mean, I really need to make headway on these, like whatever, but I have, a family death that I'm dealing with. I have, my kid has some extra commitment. Like there was just a whole bunch of like a list. And so I don't know, I think that I should probably like just slow down and reevaluate and whatever, and essentially like not, which I'm not making these good or bad. I'm just showing contrast. So they use those external like circumstances as their reasons why not to. And then the very next conversation, this person went through like a whole list, very similar, like 20-hour days, like very like a really tough personal situation, also dealing with death and grief, also some health challenges. And they said these are all of the very reasons why I must apply myself, like why it's exactly specifically the perfect time to do this. I don't think you can train that. Like I think it's this buy-in that people have to flip the switch for themselves and determine what, like where they're sourcing that from. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that perspective shift I think usually comes at the back end of making those compromises and not liking how it tastes.
Yeah. On a lighter note, I think these are baked into the inherent process you've taken people through. It's also baked into the level of support and coaching that I offer people, but also it's what we're really excited for that doesn't fully exist in the prestige, right? Where like We don't have to, like, we're not actually managing people's quitting or showing up process at all. We're almost like circumventing that by
We finally don't have to care.
nope. We're just making like this amazing world that these events that you want to show up to, you don't have to have conversations around readiness and show up and commitment. They're just like you genuinely look forward to them because they're just so different than anything else you're doing. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, me too. It's refreshing. And it's also refreshing that we haven't given up on the importance of structure and the importance of growth, and that those things are integrated. But I really feel like we hit our agenda from day one, which is what if we just give them the transformation, but it's tacit and under the surface, and on the surface we're really dealing with stuff that's more engaging and immersive and in a sense playful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's super exciting. It gives us the out. We don't have to worry about those elements. People are fully responsible for their own journeys and experiences, and we are there to facilitate those, but not direct them or dictate them.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to it.